We're learning new details about a shooting that left a teenage student dead in Baton Rouge yesterday evening. Welcome to 9 News at 5:30. I'm Liam Combs. EBR Schools says 17-year-old Amari Walker, the victim in a deadly shooting yesterday evening, was a student at Northdale Academy. Baton Rouge police say they found Walker dead yesterday around 5 on Wood Street. A second victim was hurt but is expected to survive. We're told both were seated inside a vehicle in the driveway when the shooting happened. This investigation is ongoing.
This is the story of Amari Walker. On the evening of January 10, 2026, police units were dispatched to a residential street in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, following reports of gunfire. When officers arrived, they found a vehicle parked in a driveway. Inside were two people who had been shot. One of them was a 17-year-old girl named Amari Walker. She was pronounced dead at the scene. At first glance, the shooting appeared suddenly. There were no public warnings, no immediate explanation, and no confirmed suspects. Neighbors reported hearing gunshots, but few details followed. By the time emergency responders arrived, the situation was already over. One person was dead. Another was injured and transported to a hospital. The shooter was gone. As police secured the area, questions began to form. Why was a teenager sitting in a car in that location? Who fired the shots? And was this shooting targeted, random, or connected to something larger? Investigators collected evidence from the scene, including shell casings and vehicle information. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, searching for witnesses and surveillance footage. But as hours passed, answers remained limited. This is the complete story, every action, every chilling detail. Welcome to Everyday True Crime. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Stay with us for more gripping investigations and raw true crime stories delivered daily. Now let's dive in.
EBR School Superintendent Lamont Cole responding to the violence, saying in part, quote, "We are heartbroken by the senseless violence that took the life of Amari Walker, a student at Northdale Academy. We remain committed to supporting our students, honoring Amari's life, and continuing to work with the community partners to address violence and ensure our schools are places of safety, care, and hope." Cole says iCare, an organization focusing on youth counseling and trauma intervention, will be on campus to meet with any students who may be struggling in the wake of this loss.
Amari Walker was a 17-year-old student enrolled at Northdale Academy, an educational institution serving students in the East Baton Rouge Parish school system. At the time of her death, Walker was completing her high school education and was known within her school community as an active participant in various initiatives. According to reports that emerged following the shooting, Walker had demonstrated a particular interest in community safety and violence prevention efforts. One of the most significant aspects of Walker's profile was her involvement with community organizations focused on addressing gun violence. Reports indicate that Walker had recently participated in programs organized by Cities United and the Someone Always Cares Foundation. These organizations work specifically on violence intervention and prevention strategies within urban communities. Walker's participation in these programs involved traveling to learn tactics and approaches for combating crime and violence in her community. This involvement positioned her as an advocate for the very issue that would ultimately result in her death, creating a particularly tragic irony that was noted by community members and media coverage following the incident. The specific details of Walker's personal interests, academic performance, and daily life prior to the shooting have not been extensively documented in public records. Information regarding her specific friendships, extracurricular activities beyond violence prevention advocacy, or career aspirations has not been made publicly available through official channels. Family members have not released detailed biographical information to media outlets, maintaining privacy during their period of grief. Comprehensive information regarding Amari Walker's family structure, including details about parents, siblings, or extended family members, has not been released to the public. The family has maintained privacy following the shooting, with limited public statements issued through official channels or community representatives. This approach is consistent with many families who experience sudden traumatic loss and prefer to grieve privately rather than engage extensively with media coverage. The neighborhood where Walker lived and the broader community context of her upbringing can be understood through examination of the North Baton Rouge area where the shooting occurred. This section of the city has experienced various challenges related to economic development, educational resources, and community safety over recent years. Like many urban areas across the United States, North Baton Rouge has neighborhoods with varying levels of economic stability and access to resources. How the immediate community viewed Walker specifically has been reflected primarily through institutional responses rather than individual testimonials. The response from her school and school district officials suggests she was a recognized member of the student body whose loss was felt across the educational community. Walker's enrollment at Northdale Academy placed her within a specific educational environment that serves students in East Baton Rouge Parish. Northdale Academy, like other schools in the district, operates under the oversight of the East Baton Rouge Parish school system and serves students from the surrounding community. The school's role in the community extends beyond academic instruction to include various support services and community engagement programs. Walker's documented involvement in violence prevention initiatives through Cities United and Someone Always Cares Foundation represents a significant aspect of her community engagement. These programs typically involve youth participants in workshops, discussions, and practical training focused on conflict resolution, community building, and violence interruption strategies. The fact that a 17-year-old student chose to participate in such programs indicates a level of civic awareness and community concern that extended beyond typical teenage activities. The specific nature of Walker's participation in these programs, whether she attended a single event or maintained ongoing involvement, has not been detailed in available reports. However, the mention of her traveling with these organizations suggests more than casual participation. Cities United specifically works with African American boys and young men in urban communities, though their programs often involve broader community participation. Someone Always Cares Foundation operates various youth intervention and support programs in the Baton Rouge area. Beyond her involvement in violence prevention advocacy, specific details about Walker's participation in school activities, athletic programs, academic clubs, or other community organizations have not been publicly documented. This absence of information may reflect family privacy preferences or simply the limited time elapsed between the incident and public reporting. The shooting that claimed Emir Walker's life occurred within a specific temporal and statistical context that provides important background for understanding community reactions and law enforcement responses. According to reports from early January 2026, Baton Rouge experienced a concentrated period of violent crime that alarmed community leaders, law enforcement, and residents. Within a 4-day span that included Walker's death, the city recorded 6 fatalities and 7 additional individuals injured in shooting incidents. This concentration of violence represented a significant spike compared to preceding weeks and stood in contrast to reported crime trends from 2025. Prior to this January spike, Baton Rouge had been experiencing what officials described as declining crime rates throughout 2025, suggesting that violence prevention efforts and law enforcement strategies had been showing positive results. The sudden reversal of this trend created concern among city officials and community leaders. The clustering of multiple shooting incidents within such a compressed time frame suggested either coordinated criminal activity, retaliatory violence, or a combination of factors that created an environment where multiple violent incidents occurred in rapid succession. Law enforcement agencies typically analyze such patterns to determine whether incidents are connected or represent separate criminal activities that coincidentally occurred during the same period. The broader context of gun violence in Baton Rouge reflects patterns seen in many mid-sized American cities. Factors contributing to gun violence in urban areas typically include illegal firearm availability, gang activity, drug-related crime, personal disputes that escalate to violence, and socio-economic conditions that create environments where violent conflict resolution occurs more frequently. Baton Rouge specifically has experienced periods of elevated violence in various neighborhoods, with certain areas experiencing higher concentrations of shootings than others. Statistical analysis of Baton Rouge crime data from preceding years shows fluctuations in violent crime rates, with some years showing increases and others showing decreases. The effectiveness of intervention programs, law enforcement staffing and resource allocation, community engagement efforts, and broader economic conditions all contribute to these fluctuations. The concentration of shootings in early January 2026, including the death of Emirai Walker, generated significant public response from various sectors of the Baton Rouge community. Community leaders, elected officials, religious organizations, and violence prevention advocates all issued statements and organized responses to address the spike in violence. Organizations such as the NAACP chapter in Baton Rouge have historically played active roles in responding to incidents of violence, particularly those affecting young people and communities of color. While specific statements from the NAACP regarding Walker's death have not been documented in available sources, the organization's typical response pattern includes calls for thorough investigation, community support for affected families, and advocacy for systemic approaches to violence prevention. Local religious leaders, particularly pastors of churches serving communities affected by violence, often provide both spiritual support and community organizing in response to shootings. Churches in affected neighborhoods frequently serve as gathering places for community meetings, prayer vigils, and discussions about violence prevention strategies. The death of a teenager involved in violence prevention work would typically generate particularly strong responses from faith communities. Parents and students within the school system expressed concerns following the series of shootings. The fact that one victim was a current high school student heightened anxieties about youth safety both in school environments and in broader community spaces. Schools responded by increasing counseling availability and conducting safety assessments. Public meetings and community forums addressing the violence spike were likely organized, though specific documentation of such gatherings in immediate response to the January 2026 incidents has not been captured in available sources. Such meetings typically involve law enforcement briefings, opportunities for community members to express concerns, and discussions of both immediate responses and longer-term violence prevention strategies. The sequence of events on January 10, 2026, can be reconstructed from law enforcement reports and media coverage, though specific minute-by-minute details have not all been publicly released. At approximately 4:55 p.m., Baton Rouge Police Department officers received a call regarding a shooting at the 4600 block of Wood Street in North Baton Rouge. The timing places the incident during late afternoon hours, when daylight would still have been present in January in Louisiana, though diminishing as evening approached. Upon arrival at the scene, officers discovered two individuals seated inside a vehicle that was parked in a residential driveway. Both individuals had sustained gunshot wounds. Emirai Walker, age 17, was found to have suffered fatal injuries. Despite any immediate medical response that may have been attempted, she was pronounced dead at the scene. The exact number of gunshot wounds, locations of injuries, and other specific medical details have not been released publicly, as such information typically remains part of the active investigation and autopsy reports. The second victim in the vehicle sustained gunshot injuries that were assessed as non-life-threatening. This individual was transported by emergency medical services to a local hospital for treatment. The identity of this second victim has not been publicly released, and their current condition following hospital treatment has not been reported in available sources. The relationship between Walker and the second victim, whether they were friends, family members, or acquaintances, has not been specified in public reports. The circumstances immediately preceding the shooting have not been detailed in available information. Whether the vehicle had just arrived at the location or had been parked for some duration before the shooting occurred remains unclear. Similarly, whether the victims were preparing to exit the vehicle, were waiting for someone, or were engaged in some other activity at the time of the attack has not been specified. Wood Street, where the shooting occurred, is located in North Baton Rouge, an area of the city that encompasses both residential neighborhoods and commercial corridors. The 4600 block where the incident took place is a residential area with single-family homes and driveways where residents typically park vehicles. North Baton Rouge has a diverse population and includes neighborhoods with varying economic conditions and community resources. Some areas of North Baton Rouge have experienced higher rates of property crime and violent crime compared to other parts of the city, though violence is not uniformly distributed and many blocks and neighborhoods maintain stable, safe environments. The specific block where Walker was killed represents a residential street where families live and children play. The presence of a driveway indicates the vehicle was parked on private property, either belonging to Walker's family, the second victim's family, or someone they were visiting. The setting was not a public parking lot, commercial area, or isolated location, but rather a residential space where people live their daily lives. The proximity to homes means that potential witnesses would likely have been in the vicinity, whether inside nearby residences, walking on sidewalks, or engaged in yard activities. The late afternoon timing on a Saturday suggests various residents might have been home from work or school and engaged in weekend activities. Details about whether the area has experienced previous violent incidents, the typical level of activity on the street, or specific characteristics that might have made it a target for violence have not been included in available reporting. Information regarding witnesses to the shooting or individuals who heard gunshots has not been detailed in public reports. In typical shooting investigations, law enforcement canvasses the area surrounding the incident, conducting door-to-door interviews to identify anyone who might have seen or heard relevant information. Gunshots, particularly from handguns, can be heard at varying distances depending on ammunition type, environmental factors, and background noise levels. In a residential area during late afternoon hours, gunshots would likely be audible to residents in nearby homes, though they might be confused with other loud noises such as fireworks or backfiring vehicles. Whether neighbors observed suspicious vehicles, individuals fleeing the scene, or any other activity that might provide investigative leads has not been reported publicly. This absence of information might indicate either that no witnesses have come forward publicly or that law enforcement is maintaining confidentiality regarding witness information to protect investigation integrity and witness safety. The first responders to the scene would have included patrol officers, emergency medical technicians, and subsequently, detectives from the Violent Crimes Unit. The initial response would have involved securing the scene, rendering medical aid to the extent possible, and beginning preliminary investigation activities such as photographing the scene and identifying evidence. The second individual who sustained gunshot wounds during the incident represents a significant aspect of the case, though limited information has been made publicly available. This person survived the shooting with injuries classified as non-life-threatening, suggesting that either the wounds were less severe than those sustained by Walker or that medical intervention was successful in stabilizing conditions that could have become life-threatening. The second victim was transported to a hospital for treatment, though the specific medical facility has not been identified in public reporting. Hospital names are often withheld in crime reporting to protect victim privacy and prevent unwanted contact during recovery periods. Updates regarding this individual's condition following initial treatment have not appeared in subsequent reporting. Whether they remained hospitalized for an extended period, required surgery, or were discharged relatively quickly after receiving care remains unknown from public sources. This person's potential value as a witness is considerable, as they were present during the shooting and may have observed the shooter or shooters, vehicles involved, or other details that could assist the investigation. However, whether they were able to provide useful information to investigators, whether they witnessed the actual shooting or only experienced being shot without seeing attackers, and what cooperation they have provided to law enforcement all remain confidential aspects of the ongoing investigation. The Baton Rouge Police Department's response to the Wood Street shooting involved multiple components of their organizational structure. The Violent Crimes Unit, which specializes in investigating serious criminal offenses including homicides and aggravated assaults, assumed primary responsibility for the investigation. Following the initial response and scene security, investigators began the comprehensive process of evidence collection, witness interviews, and developing investigative leads. The department issued public statements confirming the shooting and Emiri Walker's death, providing basic factual information while withholding details that might compromise the investigation. Law enforcement agencies typically issue public appeals for information in homicide cases, urging anyone with knowledge about the incident to contact authorities. In Baton Rouge, Capital Region Crime Stoppers provides a mechanism for anonymous tip submission, allowing individuals to provide information without revealing their identities. The organization offers monetary rewards for tips leading to arrests and convictions, providing additional incentive for cooperation. The police department's public messaging emphasized that the investigation remained active and ongoing, indicating that no arrests had been made immediately following the shooting. This messaging serves multiple purposes. It acknowledges the crime to the community, requests public cooperation, and avoids releasing specific details that might alert suspects or compromise evidence. The physical evidence collection process at a shooting scene involves systematic documentation and gathering of all potentially relevant materials. In the Wood Street shooting, investigators would have processed both the vehicle where the victims were located and the surrounding area where the shooting occurred. Ballistic evidence represents one of the most crucial categories of physical evidence in shooting investigations. Spent bullet casings, if present at the scene, can provide information about the type of firearm used, the number of shots fired, and potentially link the weapon to other crimes through ballistic databases. The location of casings can also help investigators determine shooter positions and firing angles. Bullets or bullet fragments recovered from the vehicle, the victims during medical examination or autopsy, or from surrounding structures provide additional ballistic evidence. Modern forensic laboratories can analyze bullets to determine caliber, manufacturer, and potentially match them to specific weapons if those weapons are later recovered. The vehicle itself constitutes a major piece of evidence. Bullet holes in vehicle windows, doors, or body panels reveal shooting trajectories and can help investigators determine where shooters were positioned relative to the vehicle. Blood evidence inside the vehicle, while tragic, provides documentation of where victims were seated and how they were positioned when shot. Investigators also photograph and document the entire scene from multiple angles, creating a comprehensive visual record that can be reviewed repeatedly during the investigation and potentially presented as evidence in any subsequent prosecution. The possibility of surveillance camera footage represents another potential evidence source. Residential areas increasingly feature home security cameras, doorbell cameras, and other recording devices that might have captured relevant activity. Investigators typically canvass the area requesting footage from residents and checking whether businesses or public facilities in the vicinity have camera systems covering relevant areas. Whether such footage exists and what it might reveal remains confidential information within the investigation. Even if cameras captured nothing directly related to the shooting, they might have recorded vehicles entering or leaving the area around the time of the incident, providing potential leads about suspect vehicles. As of the initial reporting following Emiri Walker's death, law enforcement had not publicly identified any suspects or made any arrests in connection with the shooting. This situation is not uncommon in shooting investigations, particularly those occurring in residential areas without obvious motives or clear witness identification of shooters. The absence of immediate suspect identification could reflect several investigative realities. Shooters may have fled the scene quickly, potentially in vehicles that were not clearly observed by witnesses. If the shooting occurred rapidly, victims may not have had the opportunity to clearly see attackers before being shot. The positioning of the vehicle, time of day, and other factors might have limited visibility or observation opportunities. Investigators would be pursuing multiple lines of inquiry even without identified suspects. Analysis of Walker's recent activities, communications, and social connections might reveal potential conflicts, threats, or circumstances that could point toward suspects. Similar analysis of the second victim's circumstances would be conducted. Examination of whether either victim had reported concerns to anyone prior to the shooting could provide investigative direction. The investigation would also consider whether the shooting was targeted specifically at Walker, at the second victim, or whether it represented a random attack. Determining intent and motive requires comprehensive investigation of both victims' backgrounds and activities. Gang-related violence represents one possibility that investigators would examine, though no public reporting has suggested gang involvement in this specific case. Investigators would review whether either victim had gang affiliations, whether the location had gang significance, or whether the shooting bore characteristics of gang violence. Personal disputes that escalate to violence represent another common category of shooting motives. Romantic relationship conflicts, arguments between acquaintances, or other interpersonal tensions can result in shootings. Investigation of both victims' recent interactions and relationships would be standard procedure. The possibility of mistaken identity also requires consideration. Shooters may have targeted the vehicle or individuals they believe to be someone else, resulting in victims being shot due to confusion or misidentification rather than being specifically targeted themselves. Solving gun violence cases presents numerous challenges for law enforcement agencies. and the Emirai Walker investigation reflects many of these common difficulties. Witness cooperation represents one of the most significant challenges in urban shooting investigations. Community members who might possess relevant information often hesitate to come forward for various reasons. Fear of retaliation from shooters or their associates creates genuine safety concerns for potential witnesses. Cultural reluctance to cooperate with police, sometimes referred to as a no-snitching culture in some communities, can reduce information flow to investigators. Distrust of law enforcement, whether based on personal experiences or broader community-police relations issues, also inhibits cooperation. Even when witnesses exist and are willing to provide information, the quality and reliability of that information can be limited. Shooting incidents occur rapidly, often in seconds, and witnesses under stress may not accurately observe or remember details. Descriptions of shooters, vehicles, or sequence of events can be incomplete or contradictory between different witnesses. Forensic evidence, while valuable, has limitations. Ballistic evidence requires recovered weapons for comparison, and if weapons are never found or if they lack prior records in ballistic databases, their evidentiary value is limited. DNA evidence typically requires known samples for comparison and may not be present at outdoor shooting scenes. Resource constraints affect investigations as well. Violent crime detectives typically carry multiple active cases simultaneously, and investigative resources must be allocated across all cases. While homicides receive priority attention, the absence of strong initial leads can result in investigations stalling while detectives address more immediately actionable cases. The passage of time works against investigation efforts. Memories fade, witnesses become harder to locate if they move, and evidence can degrade or be lost. Solving cases quickly after they occur generally provides better outcomes than investigations that extend for months or years. The East Baton Rouge Parish School System responded to Emirai Walker's death through official statements and practical support measures for affected students and staff. Superintendent Lamont Cole issued a statement that acknowledged both the specific tragedy of Walker's death and the broader issue of youth violence affecting the community. Cole's statement expressed that the loss of a young life to violence was devastating and deeply felt across the school community. This phrasing acknowledged the emotional impact on students, teachers, administrators, and all others connected to Northdale Academy and the broader school system. The statement emphasized the school system's commitment to supporting those affected by the tragedy. Beyond public statements, the school district deployed practical support resources. The iCare team, which appears to represent a crisis response unit within the school system, was sent to Northdale Academy to provide grief counseling and emotional support services. This team likely includes mental health professionals, counselors, and support staff trained in crisis intervention and grief support. The provision of counseling services serves multiple important functions following a student death. Students who knew Walker personally require opportunities to process grief, ask questions, and receive support as they cope with loss. Even students who did not know Walker directly may experience anxiety, fear, or other emotional responses to knowing a peer was killed violently. Staff members also benefit from support services as they manage their own grief while continuing to provide education and support to students. Schools facing such tragedies typically maintain heightened support presence for days or weeks following the incident, allowing time for acute grief responses while monitoring students who may be particularly affected or at risk. Memorial activities, moments of silence, or other ways of honoring the deceased student may be organized in consultation with the family. The school district's response also implicitly acknowledges the impact of violence on educational environments and student well-being. When students experience trauma, their capacity for learning and normal development can be affected, making supportive interventions educationally important in addition to being emotionally necessary. Direct public statements from Emirai Walker's family members have not been extensively documented in available sources. This absence likely reflects the family's decision to grieve privately rather than engage with media attention, which is a choice many families make following traumatic loss. The immediate aftermath of a violent death typically involves shock, grief, and practical necessities such as funeral arrangements and interactions with law enforcement. Families may not feel prepared or willing to make public statements during this period, preferring to focus on private mourning and supporting one another through the loss. When families do choose to speak publicly following such tragedies, their statements typically express grief, celebrate the deceased person's life and character, call for justice in the investigation, and sometimes advocate for broader changes to prevent similar deaths. Without specific statements from Walker's family, these typical elements remain speculation rather than documented fact in this case. The family's questions about motive and their emotional toll can be inferred as present even without public statements. Not knowing why a loved one was killed or who was responsible creates a particular form of suffering that compounds grief. The absence of quick arrests or clear explanations prolongs uncertainty and prevents whatever limited closure that justice proceedings might eventually provide. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.